The auctioneer had already lifted his gavel when my brother leaned across the aisle and whispered, "Don't embarrass yourself, Claire. You can't afford the curtains in this place, much less the house." I remember the smell of turkey still clinging to my coat from Thanksgiving dinner the night before. I remember my sister-in-law's perfume, sharp and expensive, drifting past me as she laughed softly behind her program. I remember my mother staring straight ahead, pretending not to hear him. Then the auctioneer looked down at his paperwork, adjusted his glasses, and said, "The winning bid has been submitted and verified." A small silence moved through the room. He looked directly at me. "Congratulations, Ms. Claire Whitaker. The property at 914 Holloway Lane is yours." My brother's face changed before he could control it. That was the first moment I understood that my family had not simply underestimated me. They had been afraid of what I might find inside that house. Good day, dear listeners. It's Nora again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please subscribe to my channel and like this video. And also let me know in the comments which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Claire Whitaker. At the time everything happened, I was 46 years old, teaching 11th grade American history at a public high school in Dayton, Ohio. I lived in a small 2-bedroom townhouse with a stubborn kitchen drawer, a porch light that flickered when it rained, and a stack of ungraded essays that always seemed to reproduce overnight. I was not poor, but I was not rich. I paid my bills. I drove a 10-year-old Honda. I clipped coupons not because I had to, but because teachers develop a respect for small margins. We learn that one missing assignment can change a grade, one quiet student can hide a whole storm, and one overlooked detail can explain an entire pattern. That habit saved me. Thanksgiving had always been difficult in my family, but that year it felt staged. My older brother Martin hosted it at his house in Oakwood, where even the napkin rings looked like they had opinions. His wife, Elise, floated around the dining room with a wine glass and a smile that never reached her eyes. My mother sat at the end of the table, smaller than I remembered, touching the pearls at her throat whenever anyone mentioned my late father. Dad had died 9 months earlier. He had been a quiet man, a retired bank manager, careful, methodical, almost too private. After his funeral, Martin told me Dad's estate was simple. There was nothing much to discuss: a modest life insurance policy, a few old tools, some savings that would help Mum. I believed him, because grief makes you tired. But at Thanksgiving, Martin started talking about Holloway Lane. It was my grandmother's old house, a neglected brick colonial near the edge of town. I had not been inside since I was a girl. My grandmother, Ruth Whitaker, had died when I was 17, and after that, the house seemed to disappear from family conversation like a page torn out of a textbook. Martin said it was finally being auctioned. "Probably a teardown," he said, cutting into his turkey. "It's been tied up for years. Taxes, liens, title issues. Nothing you'd understand." I looked up from my plate. "Why is it being auctioned now?" He smiled without warmth. "Because adults are handling it now." That sentence sat between us like a hand placed over my mouth. Later, while I was rinsing dishes, my mother came into the kitchen. She looked over her shoulder toward the dining room, then pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm. "Your father wanted you to have this," she whispered. Before I could ask what it was, Martin appeared in the doorway. "What are you two doing?" My mother's face went pale. "Nothing," she said. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of peppermint tea gone cold and unfolded the paper. It was a deposit receipt from a bank I had never used. First Commonwealth Trust. The date was 6 weeks before my father died. The amount was strange, $742.16. Too specific to be symbolic, too small to be inheritance. In the memo line, my father had written 3 words in his neat, square handwriting: "For Holloway Truth." I stared at those words for a long time. The next morning, I called the bank. The woman on the phone was polite until I gave her my name. Then her voice changed. "Ms. Whitaker," she said carefully, "you should speak with our trust officer in person." "About what?" A pause. "About the sealed instructions associated with your father's file." That was when fear first entered the room. Fear is strange. It does not always make you small. Sometimes it makes the world very sharp. I noticed the hum of my refrigerator, the ink smudge on my thumb, the way my own breathing sounded too loud in my quiet kitchen. The auction was scheduled for Saturday. I almost did not go. Then Martin called. His tone was gentle, which meant he wanted something. "Claire, I heard you've been asking questions. About Dad's bank receipt." He exhaled softly. "Mum is fragile. You digging around old paperwork will only hurt her." "What paperwork?" "Don't be difficult." There it was. The old classroom trick. When a student cannot answer the question, he complains about the question. I asked, "Why do you care if I attend the auction?" He laughed. "Because I don't want you humiliated." But underneath the laugh, I heard something else. Pressure. So I went. The auction was held in a county conference room with beige walls and fluorescent lights. About 30 people sat in folding chairs. Developers, investors, a few neighbors. Martin was there in a navy suit, sitting beside a man I recognized from local commercials. Victor Hale, a real estate attorney with silver hair and the calm expression of someone used to winning before anyone else realized there had been a contest. Martin saw me and sighed theatrically. "Claire," he said, "this isn't a garage sale." I took a seat in the back. What Martin did not know was that I had met with the trust officer at First Commonwealth that morning. Her name was Mrs. Annika Patel. She wore a charcoal blazer and spoke with the careful precision of someone who understood the weight of documents. She showed me a sealed letter from my father. "Claire, if you are reading this, I am gone or too ill to explain. Holloway Lane was never supposed to leave your grandmother's line. I failed to protect the truth when your grandmother died. I am trying to repair that now. Do not trust Martin with this matter. Do not sign anything privately. Attend the auction. Bid exactly as instructed. The funds are already arranged." I had read that paragraph 3 times before the words made sense. The funds are already arranged. Mrs. Patel then slid another document across the desk. A cashier's authorization. A secured trust account in my name. Balance, $386,000. I could not speak. "I don't understand," I finally said. Mrs. Patel folded her hands. "Your father created this account through a revocable trust amendment. The funds were transferred from an account associated with your grandmother's estate. We believe he intended you to use them to recover the property." "Why me?" "His letter says you ask questions carefully." I almost cried then, not because of the money, but because my father had seen me clearly in a family that often treated me like background noise. At the auction, I followed his instructions exactly. I did not bid early. I did not react when Martin bid through a representative. I waited until the property stalled at $255,000. Then I raised my paddle. The room turned. Martin's head snapped toward me. The auctioneer called my bid. Victor Hale leaned toward Martin and whispered something. Martin bid again. I raised mine again. This continued until the number reached $312,000. My hand was shaking under my program, but my voice stayed calm. When the auctioneer announced my winning bid, I watched Martin's expression crumble into something older than anger. Panic. Afterward, he cornered me in the hallway. "What did you do?" "I bought a house." "With what money?" I looked at him then, really looked. His polished shoes, his perfect watch, the tiny muscle jumping in his jaw. "Dad's instructions," I said. For 1 second, he forgot to be polite. Then Victor Hale stepped between us. "Ms. Whitaker," he said smoothly, "family property matters can be complicated. Before you take possession, I strongly recommend you let counsel review the title." "I intend to." His smile did not move. "Good. Choose carefully." That evening, I sat in my car outside my townhouse with the engine off. The neighborhood was quiet. A dog barked twice down the street. My auction folder rested on the passenger seat like something alive. I thought about my father's letter, my mother's trembling hand, Martin's panic, the bank account, the old house no one had mentioned for 29 years. Then I did what I tell my students to do when a primary source does not match the official story. I started a timeline. I took out a yellow legal pad and wrote dates. Grandmother Ruth died in 1996. Dad became quiet afterward. Holloway Lane entered. Title issues. Martin joined Victor Hale's firm as a junior consultant years later, though he never practiced law. Dad retired early from the bank. Mum stopped visiting certain relatives. 6 weeks before Dad died, he opened the trust file. By midnight, I had more questions than answers. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not Victor Hale. I called Evelyn Brooks, a probate attorney recommended by a retired teacher from my school. Evelyn's office was above a bakery, and everything smelled faintly of cinnamon. She was in her 60s, with short grey hair and reading glasses on a chain. She listened without interrupting while I laid out every document. When I finished, she said, "Claire, do not speak to your brother alone again." That sentence chilled me. Why? Because this is not only about a house. This is about control of an estate asset that someone may have concealed. She tapped my father's letter. "Your father believed something improper happened after your grandmother died. We need records, probate filings, deeds, tax payments, trust documents, any correspondence your father left behind." "I don't have much." "You have enough to begin." Teachers know the beginning matters. The first 5 minutes of class tell you who is listening, who is pretending, and who came prepared to challenge the lesson. Evelyn came prepared. She filed notices to preserve records. She requested the probate file from my grandmother's estate. She sent a letter to Victor Hale's office, warning them not to contact me directly about Holloway Lane. 2 days later, Martin called anyway. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was soft, wounded. "Claire, I don't know what story Dad filled your head with, but this is cruel. Mum is crying. You are tearing the family apart over a condemned house." I saved the voicemail. That became evidence item 1. Over the next week, the house closed into my name under the trust's authorization. I expected some dramatic moment when I unlocked the door, but real life is quieter than that. Holloway Lane smelled of dust, old wood and rain trapped in plaster. Sheets covered the furniture, the wallpaper peeled at the seams. In the dining room, sunlight fell through dirty lace curtains and landed on the floorboards in pale rectangles. I walked slowly. A teacher learns to read rooms, the desk with no papers, the shelf with one book missing, the rug placed slightly wrong. The story is often in what has been disturbed. In my grandmother's sewing room, I noticed the built-in cabinet did not sit flush with the wall. Its left side showed a thin shadow, like a line drawn in pencil. I pressed along the trim. Nothing. Then I saw a brass screw head painted over near the baseboard. I found a screwdriver in the kitchen drawer and worked the screw loose. The cabinet shifted forward 1/2 inch. Behind it was a narrow compartment. Inside was a metal recipe box, a bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon, and a manila envelope marked in my grandmother's handwriting. "For Claire, when the truth is safe." I sat down on the dusty floor. My hands were trembling so badly I had to wait before opening it. Inside were copies of bank statements, a handwritten will, and a photograph of my grandmother standing in front of Holloway Lane with another woman I did not recognize. On the back, my grandmother had written, "Mabel and me, after signing the partnership papers, 1978. Partnership papers? My grandmother had never been described as a businesswoman. In family stories, she baked pies, grew roses, and hosted Sunday dinners. But the documents in that envelope told a different story. She and Mabel Carter, a black widow who lived 2 streets over, had purchased several small rental properties together in the 1970s under a partnership called Holloway Women's Housing Cooperative. They rented to widows, single mothers, and working women who could not get fair leases elsewhere. The assets had grown. By the time my grandmother died, the cooperative owned 5 properties and investment accounts worth far more than anyone had admitted. At the bottom of the envelope was a copy of a letter from Victor Hale, then a young attorney, advising my grandmother to restructure the cooperative. The date was 6 months before her death. I drove straight to Evelyn's office. She read the documents with no expression, but I saw her eyes sharpen. "This is significant," she said. "What does it mean?" "It means your grandmother may have owned assets that were diverted before probate. And if Mr. Hale represented her, then later helped your brother control or conceal those assets, we may be looking at fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and possibly elder exploitation." I thought of Martin carving turkey while telling me I would not understand. I thought of my father writing for Holloway Truth. Evelyn continued, "We need Mabel Carter. She'd be very old now. Then we find her family." That search led me to a nursing home outside Cincinnati, where Mabel Carter, 93 years old, was very much alive and very tired of being ignored. Her granddaughter Denise met me in the lobby. She had the cautious eyes of someone who had heard promises before. I showed her copies of the partnership documents. Denise stared at them, then whispered, "My grandmother said Ruth's family stole from her." Nobody believed her. When I met Mabel, she was sitting by a window with a knitted blanket over her knees. Her voice was thin, but her mind was clear. "Ruth trusted the wrong young lawyer," she said. "Victor Hale?" Mabel closed her eyes. "Smooth man, clean fingernails, rotten center." She told us that after my grandmother became ill, Victor arranged new papers. Mabel was told the cooperative needed protection. Then Ruth died suddenly after a stroke, and Mabel was informed there had been debts, transfers, dissolutions. She was given a small payout and warned not to challenge the matter unless she wanted to spend her remaining years in court. "Your father came to see me," Mabel said. "My father?" "Twice. First time he apologized. Second time he said he had found an account they missed." I felt something inside me go still. "What account?" Mabel looked at Denise, then back at me. "The one Ruth set aside for you." That night, I barely slept. By then, Martin had escalated. Elise texted me a photo of my mother looking pale on their couch with the message, "Look what you're doing to her." Then an unfamiliar number called. It was Victor Hale. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, "I prefer not to involve formal channels unnecessarily. My attorney asked you not to contact me. This is personal, not legal." "No," I said. "It's both." A pause. "Your father was not well near the end. Grief can make families misinterpret things. I would hate for your reputation as a teacher to be damaged by public accusations you cannot prove." There it was, not a threat with raised fists, a threat with polished shoes. I remembered Evelyn's instructions. "Please direct all communication to my attorney." "Claire," he said, using my first name like a hand on my shoulder, "you are in deeper water than you realize." "I know," I said. "That is why I learned to swim quietly." Then I hung up and sent the call log to Evelyn. The next weeks became a different kind of school year. Instead of lesson plans and attendance sheets, my evenings filled with bank records, court filings, property deeds, old tax rolls, and email printouts. Evelyn hired a forensic accountant named Luis Moreno. He was soft-spoken and ruthless with numbers. He found patterns where I only saw columns. Money had moved from the cooperative into shell entities. Those entities purchased liens against Holloway Lane. The liens created the appearance of debt. The debt justified forced control. Then assets were sold below market value to companies connected to Victor Hale's clients. And Martin had benefited. Not in one obvious payment. That would have been too easy. Instead, consulting fees, referral commissions, a discounted commercial property, a private school tuition payment routed through an LLC. "Your brother may not have designed the system," Luis said, "but he ate from it." The biggest discovery came from my father's old safe deposit box. My mother, under gentle questioning from Evelyn, admitted Dad had kept one. Martin had told her it contained sentimental items and said there was no need to open it after Dad died. Inside were 3 things. My father's wedding ring from his first setting, a cassette tape labeled Ruth Hale/1996, and a handwritten statement signed by Dad but never notarized. I made the mistake of touching the paper before reading it fully. It felt thin, almost fragile, as if the truth had been waiting too long and might tear. Dad's statement said he had discovered irregularities in his mother's estate years earlier, but had been pressured into silence. Martin, then struggling financially, had become close to Victor Hale. Dad believed Martin had provided family records that allowed Hale to locate and exploit hidden partnership assets. Dad confronted them, but Victor threatened litigation and implied that Mum's financial security could be destroyed. My father wrote, "I told myself, silence protected my family. I was wrong. Silence protected the wrong people. I sat in Evelyn's office and cried then, quietly, embarrassed, angry at Dad, and aching for him at the same time. Evelyn passed me a box of tissues. Grief gets complicated when truth arrives late, she said. The cassette tape was worse. Evelyn had it digitized. The recording was muffled, but clear enough. My grandmother's voice. Victor Hale's voice. Another man, possibly a witness. My grandmother sounded confused. Victor sounded patient. Ruth, this simply allows me to handle matters if you become unavailable. What about Mabel? She has already agreed. That was a lie. And Claire? My grandmother asked. A pause. We can discuss Claire later. No, that house knows her. She listens when rooms speak. I had to stop the recording. I had been 17 when my grandmother died. I remembered her teaching me how to deadhead roses, how to fold linen napkins, how to tell when a pie crust had enough water. I did not know she had planned anything for me. I did not know she had seen me as someone who listened. The point of no return came when Evelyn received documents through discovery from an old title company. One file contained a fax cover sheet from Martin to Victor Hale, dated 3 weeks after my grandmother's funeral. Attached was a copy of my grandmother's original will. In that will, Holloway Lane and her share of the cooperative were left in trust, half for Mabel Carter's family, half for me when I turned 35. My father was named trustee. But that will had never been filed. Instead, a later document appeared, one that dissolved most of her assets into vague debts and administrative transfers. The signature looked wrong. Louise found notary inconsistencies. Evelyn found the notary had been out of state on the date listed. That was when I understood. My family had not called me poor because they believed it. They called me poor because it helped them keep me in my assigned seat. Every family has a curriculum. In ours, Martin was successful, Mother was delicate, Dad was quiet, and I was the modest schoolteacher who should be grateful for leftovers. They had been teaching that lesson for years. But teachers also know something else. A lesson can be corrected. The confrontation happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was grading essays at my kitchen table when headlights swept across my blinds. A minute later, Martin knocked. Not rang the bell, knocked. That small choice told me he wanted control of the scene. I opened the door but left the chain on. He looked tired. For the first time, his expensive coat did not seem like armor. Claire, he said, we need to talk as brother and sister. My attorney can arrange that. Please. I studied him. Rain dotted his hair. His expression was humble, but his eyes kept moving past me, scanning the room. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. He frowned. You won't even let me in? No. His face hardened, then softened again. I made mistakes, he said. But you don't understand, Victor. He ruins people. If this goes public, Mum will suffer. Elise will suffer. My kids will suffer. I said nothing. He tried again. There's money. Enough for everyone. We can settle privately. You keep the house. Take a payment. But you stop digging. That sounds like something Victor wrote for you. His mouth tightened. Don't be self-righteous. Dad knew. He stayed quiet too. That hurt because it was partly true. But hurt is not the same as instruction. I know Dad failed, I said. I also know he tried to fix it. Martin leaned closer. You think you're better than us because you teach teenagers about justice. No, I said. I think justice is harder than the posters make it look. His voice dropped. You have no idea what this will cost you. I looked at my brother through the porch light and rain and felt a strange calm settle over me. I already know what silence costs. Then I went inside and locked the door. The legal battle did not look like television. There were no surprise witnesses bursting through doors, no shouting in court, no dramatic confession at the last second. There were binders, there were subpoenas, there were deposition transcripts, bank certifications, title histories, notary logs, tax records, voicemail files, and expert reports. Truth, I learned, does not always arrive like lightning. Sometimes it arrives hole-punched and labelled. Victor Hale's deposition took place in a glass conference room downtown. I sat beside Evelyn, my hands folded around a paper cup of coffee I never drank. Victor wore a dark suit and answered questions with professional sorrow. He said my grandmother had been fully competent. He said the cooperative was insolvent. He said Mabel Carter had accepted settlement. He said my father had misunderstood. He said Martin had no meaningful role. For 2 hours, he built a wall out of polished sentences. Then Evelyn began removing the bricks. She showed him the original will. He said he did not recall seeing it. She showed him Martin's fax cover sheet. He said he could not verify it. She showed him the notary travel records. He said clerical errors happen. She played the audio recording. For the first time, Victor Hale stopped moving. On the recording, my grandmother asked, "What about Claire?" Victor's younger voice answered, "We can discuss Claire later." Evelyn paused the audio. "Mr. Hale, earlier you testified under oath that you were unaware of any intended benefit to Claire Whitaker at the time of Ruth Whitaker's estate restructuring. Would you like to amend that answer?" The room became very quiet. Victor looked at his attorney. His attorney looked at the table. That was the sound of a story collapsing. Martin's deposition was less polished. He tried to be charming, then wounded, then confused. But records are patient. They do not get tired. They do not care about tone. Evelyn walked him through the consulting payments. He called them legitimate. She showed the LLC ownership. He said he had forgotten. She showed the tuition transfer. He rubbed his forehead. Then she placed the fax cover sheet in front of him. "Is this your signature?" He stared at it. "I don't remember." "Mr. Whitaker, is this your signature?" A long pause. "Yes." That one word did not fix anything, but it opened the locked door. The case moved into probate court, and then expanded into civil fraud claims. The State Attorney General's office became interested because Mabel Carter's rights had been affected. Victor's firm tried to settle quietly. Evelyn advised patience. "People who depend on secrecy panic when records become public," she told me. She was right. The settlement conference took place almost a year after Thanksgiving. My mother came. She looked older, but clearer. Denise Carter sat with Mabel's power of attorney documents in front of her. Martin sat across from me and did not meet my eyes. Victor Hale was not there. His attorneys attended for him. The agreement restored title to Holloway Lane, fully to my trust, compensated Mabel Carter's family for the stolen cooperative interest, and recovered a substantial portion of the diverted funds. Victor Hale resigned from his firm before disciplinary proceedings became public. Later, he was charged in connection with falsified estate documents and financial misconduct. Martin avoided prison through cooperation, restitution, and testimony, but he lost his business position, his social standing, and the comfortable story he had told about himself. Some people wanted me to be disappointed that he was not punished more dramatically. I was not. Consequences do not need applause to be real. At the end of the hearing, my mother reached for my hand. "I was afraid," she whispered. "I know. I let your father carry it. Then I let Martin explain it. I should have asked more. I thought of all the students I had taught who believed one mistake made them permanently wrong. It doesn't. But refusing to correct it can." I squeezed her hand. "We're asking now," I said. Holloway Lane took 2 years to restore. I did not turn it into a mansion. I repaired the roof, refinished the floors, reopened the kitchen windows. In the sewing room, I left the hidden compartment intact, but empty, like a healed scar. Denise and I became friends. Together, we created a small housing scholarship in Ruth and Mabel's names for women rebuilding after loss. Nothing flashy. First month's rent, utility deposits. Legal aid referrals, practical things, the kind of help that keeps a person from falling through the floor. My mother visits on Sundays now. Sometimes we sit in the garden where my grandmother's roses have come back stubborn and bright. We do not pretend the past was clean. We talk around it carefully, then through it, one honest sentence at a time. As for Martin, I have not fully forgiven him. I do not say that with bitterness. Forgiveness is not a performance. It is not something you owe on someone else's schedule. He wrote me a letter once. Not an email, a real letter. He said he had spent years believing money proved worth. He said Victor made wrongdoing feel like strategy. He said he was sorry for making me small in order to feel safe. I put the letter in a drawer. Maybe one day I will answer it. Maybe I already answered it by refusing to become cruel. I still teach history. My students know nothing about the auction unless they search my name, and teenagers are usually too busy surviving their own lives to research their teachers. But sometimes, when we study court records or primary sources, I tell them this: never let someone summarize evidence they refuse to show you. They laugh at first, because it sounds like advice about homework, but I mean it as advice about life. There will always be people who call you poor when what they really mean is uninformed. People who call you difficult when what they really mean is awake. People who call you selfish when what they really mean is no longer useful to them. I was not brave in the beginning. I was careful. I kept the voicemail. I made the timeline. I called the lawyer. I read the documents. I listened to the rooms that still remembered what people tried to hide. And in the end, I did not become rich. I became free. The truth has a weight of its own. For years, that weight had been buried under family dinners, polite smiles, sealed envelopes, and men who thought calm voices could make theft respectable. But once the truth was lifted into the light, everyone had to decide where to stand. So tell me, dear listeners, what would you have done if your family mocked you at Thanksgiving, only for you to discover they had been hiding your inheritance for decades? Would you have settled quietly, or would you have kept digging? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story stayed with you, please like, subscribe, and pass it along to someone who needs to remember that peace is worth fighting for.